Usually, when I'm busy editing or writing, I need something to listen to, and I have a reliable set of videos to go to when I need that. Usually, it's this week's episode of the Jimquisition or one of the older Joe Rogan podcasts, but occasionally, I crave nostalgia. I go back in time with some old cartoon reviews and such related fare. I've basically been watching them since I was a zygote, so there's a lot of good old material I can still go back to. One video I still think about a lot is this one. What I hate about the cartoon community. It's not only an engaging rundown on the surface of the group back then, but it also serves as an interesting little time capsule into where things were and how things have progressed forward. As great as it was, one thing has always bothered me about it.
If I gotta go hard on the bitch, I'ma make it look sexy.
There is no reliable news site for cartoons. I said reliable.
There's already a video about why CartoonBrew sucks, so go watch that.
Now, upon first glance, this doesn't seem like a particularly peculiar statement to make. I mean, CartoonBrew has long since been known as the sleazy underbelly of animation fandom for a while now. It's not exactly controversial to say that they're, well, controversial. The bigger question is, why? Why are they so hated? I mean, we've got a video explaining it as such, but it mainly covered a lot of recent events, not much of the past. And it kind of seemed like these events were more of a focal point rather than the whole deal. So again, what's the deal with them? It's something that's been intriguing me for a while, and today I intend to give you a deeper, earnest look into CartoonBrew. Okay, before I officially jump in, I do want to lend reference to the video Mars himself recommended. Artists in the industry hate CartoonBrew by the artist formerly known as Bedhead Bernie. This video is not really out of date, and I don't intend to dethrone that one here. In fact, the historical events and situations it outlines is very much a foundation for this more editorial piece. It gives a lot of context into people's feelings, and while I don't walk away with the exact same opinion Bernie holds, I still highly recommend giving it a watch. A lot of these things are dependent on how well people remember them, and we can't forget that these things happened. Like how CartoonBrew originally started out. CartoonBrew was founded in 2004 as a joint collaboration between two animation historians, Jerry Beck and Amit Amity. Originally, the site seemed to have been a hybrid of sorts. It was structured like a blog, but it delivered a mix of content, interviews, editorials, press releases, you name it. Back in the day, it was an invaluable resource for keeping up with the current cycles of animation news, especially being run by two intrepid reporters themselves. Not only that, but it was a gateway of sorts for other avenues of content. Not only could the site refer back to the blogs and resources curated by others in the industry, but also to extra content through their own side ventures. The website would continue to evolve throughout the years with steady growth. With new growth came new resources and new additions to the concept. By 2007, the website adopted its signature look and had a whole host of content under its belt. The site continued to document many of the events the admins were a part of, along with other resources, such as the unbelievably obscure Cold Hard Flash domain. They even had a few guest writers on by this point. By the next year, they added an audio-visual component, CartoonBrew TV. Soon after that, CartoonBrew Biz became the site's de facto section for animation press releases and wider industry news, which arguably paved the way for the international news division and similar expansions. We'll touch more on them later. By this point, they delegated a person specifically to maintain this portion of the site. In 2013, the site had long since morphed into a much more powerful creature. It had built up a powerful rapport and won the good graces of many a student and industry personnel alike. It was also the year when everything, seemingly, changed. February 12th, 2013 marks the day when Jerry Beck officially said goodbye to the website through Amid buying him out of their co-ownership. There was no reason explicitly stated for the move, but shortly thereafter his older blog, Cartoon Research, was dusted off and updated with a post about Dave Fleischer. Now many would go on to question this, in ways that manifested in, ironically, other cartoon sites reporting on the cartoon site's surprising announcement. There didn't seem to be any main catalyst for the split. Like, Jerry and Mid's content were pretty polar, but they were separate works curated as such. They seemed to be working partners, and for better or worse, their conflicting views didn't seem to affect the site's evolution. On the other hand, plenty were happy with this change. Many noted the split between contemporary and classic animation as a defining feature between the two men's work, but beyond that, any pleasure to be gained from the change seemed to be more personality-driven than anything. See, for the longest time, Midi seemed to be a bit opinionated, and that kind of stuff resonated with audiences. Plenty would discuss sticking around for Jerry's work, but Amid's editorials alone were not always of interest to the wider sphere of viewers. So it was a welcome change that the two would curate different types of content on different sites. But those who were stuck and perhaps didn't anticipate a big change were in for a rude awakening.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
So from there onward, the site continued to see rapid evolution and expansions. CartoonBrew wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a whole-scale operation, and the expectations from newer, younger animation enthusiasts started to creep into the fold. I found it ironic that, despite the site's more contemporary focus on animation, Amid continued to find many opportunities to dramatically disparage and misanthropically mutter about industry happenings he didn't really care for. How many times exactly? I have no idea, I'm sorry. But I do have a highlight reel. Remember the time he joked about recolonizing the whole country of India just to re-educate them on animation because they liked a middle-of-the-road Bollywood cartoon?
Dear people of India, as of tomorrow, anything animated, whether CG, stop motion, flash, or drawn, will be taken off of your airwaves and out of your theaters. Additionally, any DVDs containing animation can be dumped in useless neighboring countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh. Furthermore, a moratorium will be placed on any animation currently being produced in India. Send your animators home. Trust me, nobody wants to see this crap anyways. As a part of your cartoon re-education...
Remember the time he went on a multi-length tirade about the downfall of Cartoon Network during the CN Real era?
Your name is Cartoon Network, so you expect to see nothing but animation when you flip CN on your TV. But the times they are a-changin', so don't get left behind, because now we've got real people and we've heard it blows your mind. Those are the lyrics from an abrasive Andrew WK music video that Cartoon Network released online yesterday. We've been reporting on Cartoon Network's slow, steady decline since April 2006. It's fascinating to watch how clumsily the network is diluting their brand, and how tactlessly they're integrating this cheap hodgepodge of live-action shows into their lineup. The first signs of a CN Real backlash are already forming. A Facebook group called Boycott Cartoon Network's CN Real Block was recently started and has over 1,400 members.
Remember the time he bitched about the end of creator-driven animation because Friendship is Magic was released and subsequently led to the first uprising of bronies?
Watching names like Rob Renzetti and Lauren Faust pop up in the credits of a toy-based animated series like My Little Pony is an admission of defeat for the entire movement, a white flag-waving moment for the TV animation industry. The signs have been there for a long time, however, and the hub is but one indicator in the precipitous decline of creator-driven content, whose demise was hurried along by Cartoon Network in its decision to relaunch with large amounts of live-action programming. The erosion of support for creator-driven animation happened gradually but surely, and today's networks clearly prefer established properties over original ideas, and dislike dealing with individual artists who have a clear creative vision.
There were, of course, more serious incidents where he actually affected industry folks more directly, and that could range from occasionally gaslighting Nickelodeon employees due to guilt by association to significantly twisting the narrative in a union dispute that put dozens of Rick and Morty animators in a rough spot. Yeah, that is a bit rough. Now, of course, I don't mean to write off the more investigative qualities of the site. These guys have the power and the drive to expose some real injustice, such as the unfortunate abuse suffered by the Sausage Party animators, or keeping a pulse on the ongoing, developing John Lasseter scandal. They even helped break the Chris Savino stories and bring them to light. CartoonBrew blew the lid open on those precisely because of guys like Amid who were willing to break the silence. People don't want an end to breaking news or editorials or whatever, they just demanded a bit more respect in the whole deal. Professionalism goes a long way, and continually gaslighting people for doing a job isn't high up there. Amid's tenacity and fearlessness and apparent bloodlust is good for swift, unbiased reporting, but oftentimes it comes in excess when reporting on the more benign, unassuming pieces of content. Even simple press releases were often corrupted with a smudge of opinionated whining. Clearly nothing is sacred. Part of it might also be the lack of good curation. Blurred lines never made it easy to see anything, but on CartoonBrew, them shits are blinding. A lot of editorials or opinion pieces leak and blend into news and other types of content. There's a special tag for the most egregious of a mid's work called bad ideas, and it doesn't refer to the articles themselves, it just refers to the subjects. These can range from bitching about branded prawn crackers to talking about the more problematic stories in the world of animation. A lot of these feel more like shitposts and functional articles, though. Like I said, there's value to be found in a highly critical mind, but when the critic fails to accurately curb or criticize their own work, it can get out of control. I say this imagining these elements won't be fixed. Mid very much considers these elements part of the site's identity, but if they were, that'd probably make for a better site experience all across the board. I don't know if anything will change on that front, but the main reason why I made this video was to highlight some of the site's best work. A large portion of the site has gone completely under the radar is the international sector. This division has a slant towards Europe and all of its happenings, but it can cover a pretty wide scope of things. There's only 5 staff members to the CartoonBrew team. Chief among them in terms of volume would be Alex Duduk DeWitt, the main European correspondent. It's crazy to me how much of a glaring difference there is to his work and Amid's. Again, the content's wholly separate, but on the site itself, the former's work plays a very important role. A lot of the site-exclusive content stems from wide-reaching reports and stories. A more recent one that captivated me was the tale of Royals Next Door and what it means for the Finnish animation industry. It sheds incredible light on the state of that ecosystem and the leaps and bounds needed to make this one an international success. Many more articles of nature are spent on amplifying student animators or new, exciting projects you wouldn't often hear about. Speaking of Finnish animation, a few years back, this site gave these guys a featured article as well. They only had a small but steady output at the time, but by 2019 they had some big shoes to fill over at Disney. They developed and got 101 Dalmatian Street greenlit. In general, these articles are not focused on the big 3 or American contemporary works, but are more poised, thoughtful, and fleshed out, and you'll come out actually having learned something from them. It's a cool balance brought to the site at a time I cannot pinpoint, but either way, it does make me see it differently. Yes, Amid is certainly a huge part of the site, but in some way, he ain't shit. Literally. His content at this point, the bits that aren't overbearingly opinionated, could have been easily taken over by anyone else at no cost to him. He's no better than the old age kids on YouTube whinging about Johnny Test marathons back in the day. He's just found more success with it. It's easy to tune this stuff out when you've got some of the amazing correspondence that fills the void for actual contemporary coverage, and it's such a good feeling. Now, I've had more than enough to say about CartoonBrew as a whole, but it wasn't the most striking thing about Mars' statement. Nah, man, it was this bit.
There is no reliable news site for cartoons.
Which, by the way, was never true. The problem is that y'all don't read. The problem is that animation communities tend to be pretty insular and experience things based on their local perspective. It's a bit rare when people tend to look outside their country or continent for material, even coming down to how they talk about international animation. Some of y'all are probably cognizant of other sources, but don't think to spread them around, so let me stop bloviating and actually highlight some of these extra resources for you. Honorable mention goes to Kidscreen. They're obviously not dedicated wholly to animation news, but since animated projects factor heavily into coverage of the niche, they keep the finger on the pulse of cartoon news. You'd be hard-pressed to find a new animated project from overseas that they haven't covered. Now, let's get on to the real giants. Animation Magazine is one of the big boys in the house that acts as a real news source rather than just an aggregator. The site is obviously home to its titular magazine, which, by the way, started offering a free year of the digital subscription due to the pandemic, so big ups on them for that. Their layout is a bit crowded, but it adequately displays the huge amount of content they collect. From press releases to huge exploratory dives, these guys have variety and are probably the best alternative you have. It's a bit more professional feeling, but you get guilt-free, sans gossip news, which is all we could ask for at this point. Their reach, unlike CartoonBrew, seems to extend far enough into the industry to have a real positive impact. The World Animation and VFX Summit has been one of the leading conventions dedicated to bringing the animators and the animation producers together to learn from each other and help plan future projects out. It's another CTNX or MIPCOM with presumably smaller, more homely focus on the medium. Animation News Network is another big guy in the ring with a sleek design and a cool blue color. The layout is also jam-packed but streamlined to fit the flow of information. The nice thing about it is that they have everything sectioned off well at the top. The blogs tab is mostly relegated to festival resources and news, while the world sections are dedicated to the corresponding magazines. The news tab is for everything else significant. It's also home to its own magazine, which I haven't checked out yet, but I hear is pretty good. They also have their own little server in case you wanted the Toon Zone vibes, but more professional. Animation Scoop is a bit antiquated by most people's taste, but it's a noteworthy figure, considering it's the current home of former co-editor-in-chief and animation historian Jerry Beck. The site seems to be more of an aggregator that occasionally hosts exclusive reviews and interviews. Its categorization is ruled by the producing entities it covers, whether it be Nick, Cartoon Network, Disney, G-Kids, or some other source. The Scoop also has some commentaries, usually stemming from what appears to be guest panelists, but for the most part, these guys stick to the news, and they're pretty active to boot. It's an oldie but a goodie. Rotoscopers has one of the more softer, cleaner aesthetics of the glut, with its blue and white palette. Its content is neatly organized by type, one of which that stood out would be the podcast category. A lot of the site seems volunteer-run. They put out an inquest for new staff not too long ago. Rotoscopers hosts enough content to sustain itself, but it doesn't get too deep into industry happenings or stuff outside the mainstream American companies. It's probably good for beginning enthusiasts or normies looking to dip a toe. Animation Xpress is another aggregator with a balanced focus on student indie films and deeper industry happenings. Its categorization system focuses on animation in different sectors, whether it be games or comics or in VFX. It's a pretty minimalist setup similar to Animation World Network's, with more negative space and lowercase titles. Interestingly enough, while its focus is slanted towards Indian animation, it manages to collect enough worldly features to make it a reliable source for enough mainstream animation news. As soon as I hit the homepage, I was greeted with an article about Dan Harmon's Fox deal, so it might have something to offer you. Skwigly is a UK-based online animation magazine that has an eclectic but appealing design. It's bold but welcoming. It's also got an active basin of content to choose from, but it has a slightly larger section of podcasts to select from as well. As with its geographical birthplace, it has its finger on the pulse of European animation at a standard many of the other guys do not meet. Animated Views has the pleasing layout of Skwigly and the mainstream content of Rotoscopers. The site seems to have a slant on interviews and other similar content, as a few categories are focused on organizing by occupation. One thing interesting about Animated Views is that they tend to look back in time. They have a category just for retrospectives of older properties, which upon first glance included general pieces such as multi-part Hanna-Barbera and Filmation retrospectives, other more obscure topics such as Enchanted and Blazing Dragons. There it is! I've laid out some of the best and brightest animation resources for any type of fan. You can stop saying there are no good resources anymore. If you end up liking any of these, make sure to share their articles, talk about the site, donate. Hell, you could even apply to write for some of them. Go shoot your shot. Just as long as we're advancing our fandoms for the common good, it's all Gucci. Now we can finally move on from this contentious squabble. Unless you're Roadside Romeo, in which case, you are haunted for life.
It is truly amazing how this single article, meant to be a swipe at the hub, wound up bringing them more viewers and revenue than anyone could have ever imagined. It really makes you think about your choices in life. What would have happened if this article had never been written? Would bronies have come into existence through some other means? We will never know the answer to that question. What we do know is that the good Mr. Amity did write this article, and for that, some thank him. Others condemn him. Regardless, this article happened, and the world was changed because of it. So, I say to you, Mr. Amity, and not sarcastically, congratulations. You have truly made a difference in this world, and even if it was not in the way you intended, you should be proud of yourself.